Okay, hello to everybody. My name is Andreas Jain. I'm working here in the ISO business since 2002 and as a German head of delegation. And I prepared this presentation together with Dave Finkelman, who will also introduce himself.
I'm Dave Finkelman. I've been involved with SC14 since 2004. And I work in private industry for Analytical Graphics Incorporated. It's space analysis software, but I have a background in standards from the U.S. Air Force as well.
The intention of this training session was that we got a lot of questions from the participants of these ISO meetings regarding some details regarding providing templates or ISO supplements, or also for the whole ISO standardization process. So the objective of this training is to provide background information on ISO first, then especially information on the ISO process, especially the standardization development process, and also to indicate additional documentation and tools which are available by ISO. If you have any questions during the presentation, please do this also during the presentation. And also we will provide this presentation, I think, with the minutes of the plenary session, and also it may be available on the ISO website also as a PowerPoint that everybody can update this presentation. So we just updated this last week because there was a new update of the ISO directives. So it's always necessary to update these items. First, I want to introduce ISO, but I think most of this is known. ISO itself announces that the world's largest developer of standards, of ISO standards, and it's a network of national standards institutes of about 163 countries. But this is done on the basis there's only one member per country allowed, despite if there are several standard development organizations as a national available. So there has to be nominated one of them as a member, as a country member within ISO. There's a central secretariat at Geneva in Switzerland, which coordinates the system, and there are over 200 technical committees, which are provided, or the secretaries of these committees, which are provided by the national members. Mostly US and Germany, as I know. The objectives of ISO are to provide a reference framework and a universal language for suppliers and customers, to ensure the technical compatibility, and also to support the implementation of trade agreements. The main objective to develop uniform international standards which may be accepted worldwide has some prerequisites, like as many as possible member countries shall be involved in the standardization work. Also, all stakeholders, including the government agencies, as well as relevant intergovernmental and non-governmental organizations, has to be involved. And also, within the standardization process, a priority shall be given to describe performance requirements and interfaces. So, what has to be done, not how to do it. Also no methods and tools. So the principles are the implementation of ISO standards are voluntary, on a voluntary basis, so there's no obligation, but of course you cannot. You can use them in a contract. There shall be a market relevance, so the needs shall be stated by all the stakeholders which are involved in the standardization process, and it's consensus-based. So there's one vote per country, also for each country only one vote, and shall be not dominated by the different interest groups. Also, national standards may become an ISO standard, and ISO standards may be adopted as a national standards. So there are both possibilities in both directions. The ISO organization has different bodies, like here shown in the slide. There's a General Assembly, which is responsible for the whole organization, especially for the ISO rules. There is the council, which is doing the administration of the organization and has some supports by different bodies, like for conformity, for user needs, for developing countries, as well as for finance and strategy. The technical work is done by the Technical Management Committee, which has also support here by the technical advisory groups, and REMCO is a specific body regarding one moment. Yeah, it's for the harmonization and supporting the application of reference materials. But I haven't seen anything from them in the last 10 years. So maybe they don't have so much support. The Technical Management Committee also administrates the technical work, like the technical work regarding the technical committees, which are doing the technical work like reviews, publication, and so on. The same for the subcommittees on specific subjects, and on a not constant basis, there's also the possibility to establish working groups, which we have here on SC14. In general, there's a relationship between the national standardization development organizations and, for example, ISO here. So each technical committee, which will have, in general, a national mirror committee, which will send out delegates to the technical committee. And also the mirror committee will do some kind of consensus to provide the voting activities and to have a national position on the votings. Also, they will send experts to the subcommittees and working groups to be involved in the standardization work. So, that's for Dave.
I'll stand on this side too. Please ask questions, because I know that when I entered this activity, I knew nothing and nobody told me anything. So I went to the meetings and they used terms and spoke of processes that I knew absolutely nothing about, and I am sure that there are people in the audience who are the same way even today, even after you've come a few times. So as Andreas said, ISO has over 200 technical committees, and they cover a very wide range of subjects. For example, there is a whole ISO technical committee on radio frequency identification devices, the little chips when you buy something and they scan it in the supermarket. That's also an ISO committee. So we are part of Technical Committee 20, which is aircraft and space vehicles. One of the issues for all of us is that in some countries the aircraft part is not very active. That's the case in the United States. In France, the aircraft part is very active. And the relationship between aircraft and space sometimes is very vague. It's hard to, find common interest between the airplane people and the space people. So this is the organization in the United States. The member body of ISO for the United States is the American National Standards Institute. It is not a government organization. It is a private organization, not for profit, that objectively develops and publishes standards. In many countries, the national member body is a private organization. In other countries, it's a government organization. But the principles of ISO are that it's equal or at least representative of government, industry, and universities and academic. And that kind of balance is required so that there cannot be a working group or a standards drafting committee that is only government people or only industry people. It must be, there must be balance to represent the interests. And we are Subcommittee 14 in Technical Committee 20. And there is another organization that is very closely related to us, Subcommittee 13. And I'll tell you more about that, I think, on the next slide. Yes. The Consultative Committee for Space Data Standards is an interagency activity among space agencies only. And they develop standards for interfaces, communication with deep space missions, communication protocols for transmitting information from satellites to the ground and back. Many of their standards are used on almost every satellite. There's a space communication protocol standard that is applied worldwide. What it does is that the internet protocol, like TCP/IP, is not very tolerant of long delays and long path lengths. It can time out. So what CCSDS did is they modified it so that it would work from satellites to the ground where the distance is very great and the time delay is also very great. So that's a very important contribution to all space activity, is in the details of how the bits are transmitted electromagnetically. They are organized very much different, and they have, if you don't understand the words, please ask. They have institutional support. NASA and the other space agencies actually contribute money to fund their activities, and they pay most of Nick's salary and Amy Barrett. If it weren't for CCSDS and the space agency involvement, then Nick and Amy probably wouldn't have a job. Nick and Amy work for the American Institute of Aeronautics and Astronautics. The member body, ANSI, in the United States designates a secretariat for the subcommittees. Actually, it's international, and ANSI has agreed to provide the secretariat for SC14 and for SC13, and they have delegated that responsibility to the American Institute of Aeronautics and Astronautics. And I'll have more to say about that, because even though they are employed by AIAA and funded mainly by NASA, they are supposed to be internationally objective. They do not represent the United States. They serve the entire subcommittee, no matter which country or which member body. So, is there a pointer? There it is. So they have, they're organized very, very much like a church. They have archbishops and bishops and local priests, and so their overall management board is elected from among them. The current leadership is Adrian Hook from NASA, and the organization within that we have most interest in is the navigation working group, which is in this technical area. They have area directors, mission operations and information management services. Underneath that, there is a navigation working group, and that's the people I deal with mainly. But Fred Slane, who is now our liaison with CCSDS, is more involved with things like cross-support services and onboard interfaces for equipment. So this is our organization. The secretariat is ANSI. Secretariats for different ISO subcommittees are in different countries. One I deal with reasonably often is the ISO Technical Committee on Terminology, and the secretariat for that is in Hong Kong. There's an ISO Technical Committee for Geospatial Information, maps, and geodetic activity, and the secretariat for that is in Norway. So they really are designated from supporting agencies all over the world, but they serve all the countries that belong to that committee or subcommittee. So our Nick Tongson is our professional secretary. He has much experience throughout ISO and other technical committees. He is assisted by Amy Barrett. You get most of your email from Amy Barrett. And the chairman, the convener of the whole subcommittee is Larry Schultz from the United States. I almost shine my light in your eyes, but I think people will know who you are. And the extent of our working groups is, as you see, Working Group 1 for engineering design, Working Group 2 for interfaces and testing, Working Group 3, the one that I lead, for operations and ground support. 4 is the space environment, which is standard atmospheres, characterization of charged particle distributions in the atmosphere, very closely related to the COPUOS research organization. Program management, Séverin Drogoul from France. And materials and processes, which very recently, the last 2 or 3 years, also include standards for human habitation environments. And I don't see Thais here, but we actually have a medical doctor who's involved in that. Of course, Alexei Jurgen that I see in the front row. It's worth discussing some of these that are of common concern, but not maybe of interest to your particular group. The problem there is that NASA standards for the human breathing environment, for example, and water, were written for the International Space Station and the U.S. Space Shuttle. But there are different standards for Russian space vehicles and different environmental specifications. As I recall, the International Space Station has 2 different water systems, one to Russian standards and one to U.S. standards, which points out why our work is so important, because it's so expensive to put things up in space, and yet we had to do it double because we couldn't agree on what the standard was for drinking water or for breathing environment. And Alexei, 2 or 3 years ago, proposed a new standard that would cover all long-term space habitation, not just the International Space Station. And of course, Russia has more experience with that than than anybody, and NASA canceled its standard for the space shuttle. It was NASA Standard 3000. So we're still trying to put things together through ISO to come up with a standard, because there really is no normative standard now for the habitation environment, and to make it apply to everything. That, it started in my working group, and I quickly discovered I knew nothing about this. So I passed it off to Working Group 6, which also knew nothing, but they learned. And then the Orbital Debris Coordination Working Group was formed actually about the same time that I started working with ISO, and its task is to assure that orbital debris management and mitigation are properly considered in the standards that each of the working groups is responsible for. That gets to be a little difficult because they have to visit and coordinate with every working group. Their primary project was ISO 24113 that was published two or 3 years ago, actually, and there will be a resolution at this meeting that they should be totally responsible for 24113 and similar tasks that they can do on their own. And that, I think, is a good idea. But if you look at the ISO website, which Andreas will show you later, all delegates are registered with ISO in working groups 1 through 6. There is no, as far as ISO is concerned, ODCWG is a local convenience. So if we establish it as a separate working group with standards development responsibility, we'll have to go through whatever ISO processes are necessary to institute it that way officially. So now we're into the real business. This is a definition. Actually, I think I took it from the British National Standards Institute, and it says that a standard is a document established by consensus and approved by a recognized body that provides for common and repeated use, rules, guidelines, or characteristics for activities or their results. And it's obviously meant to achieve an optimum degree of order. But the words that are in red are very important. Consensus. What does consensus mean? And the common and repeated use. You don't make a standard for only one person. It has to be used and applicable by many organizations, not just a few. And it has to be used frequently when you're producing an item, and you have to make them all compatible with somebody else's interface. So we don't make standards for people who don't need them. They have to be people who need them, that are in sufficient numbers, that they need the interface, the communication between them, to make sure that their products all work together, and they have to use it regularly, not just one time. So if it's only a few people and it's only occasionally, that's not a good subject for a standard. And the part in yellow is very important. There are meanings underneath all those words. That standard should be based on consolidated results of science, technology, and experience. Do not assume that a standard is the best way to do things. A standard is the way we can all agree to do things. Individually, we may have better ways. But if we're going to work with each other and be able to be interoperable, then there are some things we all have to do the same way, even though it's not necessarily the best way for any of us individually. And that is very, very important. Often people say, oh, this is to a standard, so it's the best way to do this. It should be. Most of the time it is, but not always. So, what are ISO standards? Again, I have words in red. They're normative documents developed by consensus and approved by ISO membership and permanent members, P members, in accordance with the directives. Now, those are good words, but there's a lot of meaning that goes along with them. This one sentence is not enough to understand what it is, because what does the word normative mean? It's a very unusual word that's used often, or most often, in developing standards. And it means what must be done. It uses words like shall and must. They're not conditional words. They're affirmative words. You must do it this way in order to be in conformance with the standard. And the very important thing about that is that in many countries, in the United States, a normative document can be cited in a contract, a legal contract. So you don't have to put in your contract, you have to use this kind of bolt and that kind of interface. If you just say you must use ISO standard whatever number, then that includes everything in the standard. And those who sign the contract are legally required to do that through, national laws, official. So at that point, it's not voluntary. When you employ a normative document in your operations, then it becomes something that people could take you to court if you don't do it exactly that way. And not conditional, but as I said, they have legal standing, and normative status is earned through broad consensus and a very exhaustive review, and a very well managed change control process, so that you can use parts of a standard. You don't have to use the whole standard, but you cannot change anything in that standard. And there are ways to change a standard, but it's a very methodical, very long process, just like developing the standard in the beginning. There has to be a drafting committee. It has to be reviewed by the subcommittee and the technical committee. It has to be approved by ISO in Geneva. And that's one reason that these documents have such strong legal standing, is that the changes are controlled. You can't just say, I'm using this standard, but I'm going to change this word and that word and the other word. So what is consensus? We have had discussions about this in this subcommittee, even as recently as our last plenary in Berlin. Consensus doesn't mean that everybody has to agree. If there's one voter who doesn't like something, if it had to be unanimous, anybody could keep anything from happening. And in fact, I don't think we have anybody from Poland, but over centuries and centuries, that's the way the legislature of Poland worked. Any noble could veto anything, and so the country fell apart. It's the same way in the United Nations Security Council. Maybe that will fall apart too. And everybody can agree, but if there's one that doesn't, it won't happen. That's not the way ISO is. In some cases, actually, the percentage of those who vote does have to be greater than a certain number. But in general, consensus means that nobody objects so strongly that they just walk out of the room. There is a process in the United States, in our legislature, where legislators who don't agree with something, they don't have to stop it from happening. What the words they use, it's very complicated English words. They say, we interpose no objection. That doesn't mean that they agree. All it means is that, okay, we'll let everybody else go ahead and do it. We won't stop you, but we don't like this. That's still consensus, as long as they don't object so strongly that that people resort to physical violence to get their way. But there's no firm definition of how many people, how many votes constitutes consensus. It's certainly more than a majority, but how much more it depends on the situation. So this is a very important chart. It's in fact, most of the things Andreas and I are talking about are on the ISO website, and there is a very meaningful ISO publication called My ISO Job. And everyone who is serious about participating should read and understand that document. This is the sequence of development of an ISO standard. And I am sure I don't understand it completely. So anybody in the audience that knows more than I, and there are many, should correct me if I say something wrong. We start out in the preliminary stage, and that is initial preparation to investigate the likelihood of success of a standard that somebody wants. We have several in this meeting that are at the preliminary work stage, where you go to a working group or several working groups, you inform them of what you would like to do, you get their feedback, and they will either encourage you to develop it further into a proposal or discourage you and tell you nobody needs this. And that happens too. It happens to me a lot. Then there's the proposal stage. So, and this is to approve the project. So, and in CCSDS, it's a very much more meaningful process because their approval criteria include: does the proposer have the resources to do this? Is our workload sufficiently able to accommodate more work than we already have? Sometimes a proposed standard is not initiated as a new project because we don't have the people among us, or it's going to cost money and we don't have the money. Those are important considerations in approving a project. But the first consideration is technical merit. Is it really something that a number of organizations or people need and that they would use repeatedly? If it doesn't pass that criterion, you don't consider it further. But that's not sufficient. It can be a good thing, and still we are not able to do it because we don't have the capability or the resources, the money or the people. So. This is the stage. For example, there are a couple of proposals from China that they have gone to the working groups. In the preliminary stage, they have guidance about what to do, and at the next meeting, they will turn that into a new work item proposal. And to work on that and register it as an official ISO element of work, it has to be voted on by the entire subcommittee. That doesn't mean we have to have a meeting. It can be a vote, through the mail or email. Then you start working on the project, and from the time it's approved as a project to adoption as a committee draft, it's totally within the working group. So the working group refines it, iterates it, coordinates within the members of the working group, and when they think that it's sufficiently mature that they want to expose it to the rest of the world, then they will bring it forth for a vote to advance it to the committee draft stage. And that is when all the other working groups, national bodies, have the opportunity to submit comments. Hopefully the working group has done a good enough job that nobody should know more about what they do than they do. But it happens often that there are people in the other working groups who have an interest and think things should be changed. So once you have succeeded at satisfying everybody in the subcommittee, there is another vote to advance it to what they call the inquiry stage. At that point, you know, the working group has done its job, and it goes as far as getting to the stage of a draft international standard, which, you know, there should be no more technical issues at that point. And then it goes through a worldwide review by all the member bodies, and in fact, even a public review where it's announced in some official publication or newspaper or a magazine, this standard is being considered for the whole world. Does anybody have anything to say about it? Are there any problems? And anyone can comment. I mean, any member of the public, it doesn't matter where they come from, the whole world has the right to comment and seek modifications that they might feel are necessary. Now, that doesn't mean, you know, at every stage, from working draft on, there are official comment forms that you're supposed to use, and the drafting committee considers those comments, but it doesn't mean that every comment is going to be accepted. You know, many comments are you know, individual, unique, and they may not be accepted by the drafting committee. But the drafting committee has, and the leader has to justify why he accepted or disapproved a given suggested modification. There has to be a reason. Often the reason is, and I use English words, that it's not actionable. I don't know how many of you, you know, share the same meaning of that word, actionable. For example, if someone makes a comment and says, I don't like this, change it, that's not actionable. They have to tell you what they don't like, why they want it changed, and suggest how it should be changed. That's actionable. But we do get, you know, comment forms that say, I don't like this, take it out. Or that say, I think this should be written another way, and that's where it ends. They don't suggest the other way. So many comments are rejected because they're not actionable. There's not enough information to know whether the comment has any validity or not. So you should be very careful when you make comments to be more specific about what you want done. You know, you can say, leave this out, that's actionable. They can decide, no, I'm not going to leave it out, I'm going to leave it in, but they have to justify why they're doing that. You know, it should be a very open process in which anyone has the same right to make comments, to suggest changes. But overall, the final product is consensus. If the team leader decides, I don't like this comment, and the whole working group it has consensus, no, this is not a good comment, then the comment won't go in. So it's not one person's decision, but it is consensus. If a work item is very mature, in other words, you may already have a national standard that's very complete in the right format, and generally everyone agrees that this is something everybody could benefit from, you don't have to go through all these steps. You can enter the process at an advanced stage. It takes a great deal of justification to do that, but it's a very quick way for things that don't require much discussion. Now, CCSDS, I'll come back to that, enters as SC14 at the draft international standard stage. They have their own process for doing the rest of this. We certainly can participate in it if we have the time and understand everything they're doing. But their documents come before us and the rest of ISO at this stage. Now, that also doesn't mean we can't change it. CCSDS doesn't like us to change it. But there are some things that after they've done their job, the rest of us that have different experience and needs may find things need to be changed. The best way to make sure that doesn't happen is to work together when there are work items of mutual interest. And we did that in 26900, which is orbit data messages. We had an interest in the physics of, what is the orbit information. They had an interest in what is the format of the message that people send to each other. We worked together. It was a joint item. In fact, it was developed mainly through CCSDS, but it was registered in ISO through SC14. So that, that's the ideal way things should work. They don't always work that way. We have an item now that in which there is some disagreement. So if you enter the darn it, I'll never get this right. So there's the inquiry stage, draft international standard. If there are no substantive comments, then it can be published as an international standard. But if through this worldwide review process there are comments that need to be addressed, then you go back into the final draft international standard. You have a few months in which to address those comments and then go back to ISO for final approval. And that happens too. So the final product is an international standard. That is a problem for some of us because ISO can support itself only by selling the standards. And what's even worse is that they're in Switzerland, so the prices are in Swiss francs, which are worth more than anybody else's money. So if we want our own standard, the final copy, we have to buy it. And I think that's not good. There are, in fact, it's always the case that before you propose or write a standard, you should be able to demonstrate that there are no other standards that cover this subject or parts of this subject. The only way to find that out legally is to buy the other standards and see if they have the same material. That's the legal way to do it. There is another way to do it. I didn't say illegal. And that is, the other standards also have their own secretariat. And the secretariats have copies of all the standards. So, for example, I had one standard that had to do with imaging things on the ground. And I needed to make sure that the ISO committee responsible for maps and geospatial information wasn't already doing this. So I contacted the secretariat in Norway, and they sent me a copy. This is the unofficial, behind the scenes.
There's a slight clarification. If you're a working group and you are drafting a document and would like ISO documents to review ISO documents, let me know because I can get those documents for you from ISO Central Secretariat. Now, this is only for drafting documents. So if you need those documents to review, I can provide those for you.
And this is very important. We all have our own technical jobs, but when we identify the need for a standard, because we and our colleagues need this, you still have the responsibility to make sure that there isn't already another standard that does this for you. Not to have duplication of effort or just, maybe I'll use the word, maybe we're just too lazy to, it's easier to say, well, nothing like this exists, so we have to do it ourselves. But in many cases, something like this probably exists someplace out there. And it may not only exist in ISO, because ISO is only one of many different standards organizations. And the standards organizations try to collaborate and coordinate with each other, but it doesn't always happen that way. We may deal with different industries. For example, the American Society of Mechanical Engineers does some things for space, and often they don't recognize that ISO has space-related activity. It's not so much a problem in other technical areas, but it is a problem for space because space is so new and so many different disciplines were involved initially because there were no people trained in space. So you may find software standards in human psychology because the original software experts were psychologists. They knew the logic processes. So it's not always easy to do an exhaustive survey, but you do have the responsibility to demonstrate that there's nothing already there that doesn't serve the purpose. Was this yours, Andreas? Still mine. Oh, no. So there are different categories of participation in ISO. In principle, the only fully vested members, the only ones that have all the rights, like to vote, are permanent members, P members. Representatives of P members have an obligation to vote on everything that comes before the subcommittee. You cannot say, this is a subject I know nothing about, I'm not interested in it, therefore I won't vote. If you don't vote, that changes the number of votes that are required. It invalidates the process. For example, I think it's a minimum of 5 now, 5 positive votes to advance from one stage to another. I'm looking at you. 4? So it doesn't matter if there are only 3 votes and all the votes are in favor. It's not a valid ballot because you didn't have the minimum number of participating voting members. So if you don't vote, you're liable to kill a worthy standard just because you didn't bother to vote. If you don't know anything about it, then the proper thing to do is to abstain. Don't vote no, just abstain. And that's a vote. It counts as a vote. So you don't influence the outcome and you don't invalidate the process. Another thing about voting is sometimes people will say, well, I don't like this, I don't need this. What you should do in that case is abstain, because even though you don't need it, somebody needs it. Otherwise, it wouldn't be there for a vote. So you shouldn't deny the fact that somebody needs it just because you don't. Then there are observer members. They can be national bodies that are not members of ISO, but they are only observers. They can participate in deliberations, but they don't have to vote and they don't vote. The only time that others can submit such comments is inquiry drafts that go out for everybody to comment. And then there are corresponding members, because there are some countries that don't have designated national standards bodies. Now, in the United States, everybody thinks that the member body is the National Institute of Standards and Technology, a government organization. It is not. The member body of ISO is a private organization, the American National Standards Institute. And as I said, every national body has the right to vote on inquiry drafts. That's when they go out for wider review. A national body can join or drop out, as they see fit. If a permanent member doesn't participate sufficiently often, voting, attending plenary meetings, and so forth, then they can be demoted to only observer members. And that is about to happen to Canada. Did it happen, or? They did drop out. Wow, that's not good. Because one reason it's not good is that Canada this year is in charge of the IADC, the Interagency Debris Committee. So if they're not affiliated with ISO, that it's not good for ODCWG in particular. But I understand why you know, and SC13? Oh, my heavens. This is not good. I may have to leave the room to cry. Because, you know, Canada is a spacefaring nation, and it's really not good if they don't, you know, collaborate and participate. And I was just there, you know, and I spoke to them. Like, maybe they dropped out because I spoke to them. So, you know, this is, I said this before, do not cast positive or negative votes just to remain a P member. You can abstain if the vote counts, and it sustains your membership and your rights in ISO. But if you don't vote at all, that's the worst thing you can do. And the Secretariat, Nick gets paid a very high salary for doing this for everybody. So you have to, you know, respond to Nick because they'll take his money away. And the Secretariat is responsible for administering all of our activity, including preparation for the meetings, and as I said, they have to act in a purely international capacity. The fact that AIAA is an American organization, it should not affect the way Nick and Amy serve and respond to any member nation of this subcommittee. This is still me. Oh no. Now that, yes, I know how far it goes now. Working groups. You remember that we have technical committees, subcommittees, and working groups. What I'm telling you on this chart is what it says in ISO Directive 1. There are 2 ISO directives that are the operating rules for ISO. One deals with the organization and procedures, and the other deals with preparing the documents. So a working group is actually supposed to be convened for a specific purpose. In other ISO committees and subcommittees, the subcommittee decides, all right, we agree we need a standard for launch site interfaces. Then each member organization, each nation, will nominate an expert who should be in charge of it. And that expert is confirmed by the whole subcommittee, and independent of where he comes from. He is selected based on his knowledge and experience, not his nation. And then the members of the working group are really up to the working group chairman to collect experts from everywhere to actually participate in drafting the standard. There are certain unwritten rules. For example, I mentioned earlier balance, that he shouldn't only get people from one industry. He shouldn't only get people who work for the government. He shouldn't only get people who do research at universities. The working group should have a distribution of all of these interests in drafting the standard. And also, the people who participate, not only should they have the necessary technical expertise, but they should also have what they call a material stake in the outcome. There shouldn't be somebody writing the standard who is not affected by that standard once it exists. So they have a personal interest in making it come out right, not people from the outside. The best example I give is the people who design the traffic patterns on the roads. The reason the traffic is so bad is that those people don't have to drive on the roads they design. You know, if the traffic engineers would have to go to work every day through the intersections that they design, I'm sure we would have a different system. So in ISO, it has to be people who are actually involved and who might use the standard. This is what the directives say. I have another chart that demonstrates how SC14 is a bit different than what the directives say. ISO liaison organizations. There are other organizations that have an interest in what we do, but they're not necessarily national representatives, and they are allowed to contribute to our work, to observe our operations, and to try to influence the drafting of standards to suit their needs. And there are three kinds of liaison organizations. Category A is those who can really make a technical contribution. ECSS is a Category A liaison. They have technical people who can contribute to our work. They can also propose standards within ISO that we will vote on. Then Category B is organizations that just want to know what's going on. And Category D are organizations that have people who might serve on a working group, but in general, the organization doesn't really need to be kept abreast of everything that's going on. There was a Category C. I don't even remember what that was or is. And these are the ISO products. This is very important for your work. I get this wrong all the time. Our work does not necessarily only produce an international standard. An international standard has all of the requirements of consensus and being normative and being affirmative and so forth. But there are other categories that are of lesser, I don't want to say value, that's the wrong word. They're not as mandatory necessarily as a full standard. There's a technical specification, and that is something still under development. There may not yet be consensus, but you need to get the information out. And one example, although it's not ISO, is Internet, Wi-Fi. It's actually an Institute of Electrical Engineers standard, 802.11. And then there's 802.11a, b, c, d. The latest one is 802.11.n, which are the routers you have in your home that have many antennas and they have greater range. The standard for 802.11.n has not yet been approved. But nonetheless, people have to have something to build to the standard to provide a better product. So if you look on the bottom of a router, a Wi-Fi router you have in your home, it will say 802.11 pre-N, not yet N. And there's a warning, okay, you buy this now, but the standard when it comes out may say something different, and this instrument may not be any good at all. So that's an example of where technical specification is required, even though there's not yet consensus, even though the process hasn't yet been, fully completed. But a technical specification, the intent is it will eventually become a standard. And there are different numbers of votes required, a more frequent review process for a technical specification than for an ISO standard, because ISO standards are designed to be hard to change, but if there's still some uncertainty, you want it to be easier to change. Then there's a technical report, which is purely informative. It may be best practices, for example, are technical reports. We have one that's best practices in astrodynamics for propagation. It's not a standard. You don't have to do it that way, but most people do it this way, and if you do it this way, people will understand better what you did. Best practices. And then there are others that we hardly ever use. I'm not sure I need to say anything about a publicly available specification that comes out on a short time scale an international workshop agreement. We may have workshops that involve several several working groups or even several organizations like the International Telecommunications Union, and they will come to a consensus, and it may be published this way. The last two are important. A technical corrigendum is when there is mainly a minor flaw, usually an editorial flaw in a standard that has been published, and you want to change a word. You can't change the normative technical content, but it doesn't pay to go through the whole process because you want to change a word. So they issue, like addendums. They call them corrigenda. And then ISO guides are, they're booklets like my ISO job, that is information about how ISO works. So I don't expect you to remember this, but these charts, Andreas and I and others have condensed the essential information so that you are not unfamiliar with what is a ISO standard, what is a technical report, what is a working group, what is a technical committee. And as I said, when I got into this business, it was just a foreign language to me. I understood Chinese better than ISO. And schedule guidance, and this is my last chart, right? Or your first one?
My first one. Okay. I think one of the most common questions which has Nick to face is about the deadlines of the different projects. So there's no real timeline within an ISO standardization project, but there's provided by ISO some kind of a schedule guidance. So it will start after the new work item proposal is registered at ISO. And there's a recommendation to finish the work within 36 months, so 3 years. And you can see it here. On the last 10 years, it was possible to reduce the average development time from 3.7 years to 2.7 years, so reduce it nearly by 1 year. This guidance provides that the working draft shall be provided within 6 months, and additional 6 months to finish a committee draft, with a review time of 2 to 4 months, depends on some requirements. Also for the inquiry draft, we have additional 12 months, so in total 24 months, and additional 9 months for the approval draft, so there will be in total 33 months. So that we have, after 3 years, a published standard. This is only a guidance, of course. This will be tracked by the ISO Central Secretariat. And if you are going to miss one of these deadlines, which are there, you will also find it on the ISO website. I will show it to you later. Then you can ask for an extension of these. The first step you will be on a critical list, and then if you make no further progress, then you will be facing that your project will be cancelled. But you can then ask via Nick for an extension of the deadlines. For the new work item, I think some of you have already seen the form. The new work item proposal there's a form which are provided by ISO, which have to fill it in with a title, with a scope, with a purpose and justification, and also, which is new, there's also necessary to nominate a project leader. You can add some associated documents like an outline or a draft, and also there is some questions about the market relevance. How is the contribution to international trade and production, or to the economic efficiency, health, safety, and the environment? And also the potential for harmonizing national approaches. Yeah. The new work item proposal will be accepted by a simple majority, so with at least 4 P members. And this is also new in the new directive from April 2012, that they have to nominate an expert. So we need at least 4 valid votes, and they are only valid if an expert is nominated. So then the new work item will be registered in the program of work of the technical committee or subcommittee, and are registered there. And then, of course, the clock will be started within the 36 months for the development of the standard. Dave give you a whole overview about the standardization process. We will go now in a little bit more in detail on the different stages. So the working draft stage is strictly on the working group level. So the rest of the subcommittee is normally not involved. Of course, there may be some discussion between the different working groups in SC14. But when this document is approved by the working group, then the work item will enter a ballot to become a CD. It will be then all the administrative work will be done on the subcommittee level for balloting, voting, and so on. So the working group shall ensure that all the stakeholders and experts in the working group are involved and have a final working group draft which is taken into account the consensus of the working group. Then on the comments which will become from the working group, or if it is on a CD commenting phase, so each comment must be disposed of, and the ultimate authority is the drafter. But of course, he take to account the opinion of the working group members, and these comments shall be discussed, or the disposition comments shall be discussed on working group level. So this does not mean that every comment has to be accepted. There are some reasons for rejection comment. Maybe it's not applicable, or it's inappropriate at this stage of the development, or there's no enough reason for justification of this comment or proposed change. So, yeah.
The thing in yellow is very important because we don't always agree on everything, but most things we can agree on. And we should not delay the whole standard because there are a few things that we don't agree on. The best thing to do is to remove those for consideration later, maybe in a subsequent review or another standard, and to keep moving on the standard that you have. We had one good example of this with ODCWG. There is an IADC, an interagency committee, guideline that particulate matter ejected from a solid rocket motor should have no pieces bigger than 1 millimeter. And we actually did studies, Japan contributed significantly, in which the manufacturers said, we can't do this without reinventing the solid rocket motor. But nonetheless, there are some who wanted, exactly what the IADC recommended. We could not come to consensus. So in 24113, we left that out. It's important to come up again later. But we could not delay the whole orbital debris standard for this one item that has to be solid rocket motors. And there were 100 items everybody agreed to.
There is, for commenting on the CD commenting phase, there is a form provided by ISO. these comment resolution metrics. And this can be also used not only for the CD commenting phase, also for every ballot phase where comments are possible. So most of you have seen this. There is to indicate the member body, the type of comment, if it's a general one, it's an editorial one, or a technical, then the commenter has to give his comment with a justification, and then he has also to propose a change, also to propose a text. What has to be changed in what kind. And then at the end, the responsible project lead of this document can do the disposition here on the last line, which has to be, I think, in line with the working group.
Yeah, this is, I mean, I've drafted several standards, and to me this is a problem, because this is just a form that you fill out. Different commenters will each fill out a form, and they may all make a comment on the same thing, and there's no convenient way to correlate, you know, that somebody else has already made this comment, you don't have to make it, that I've already dealt with this matter and I don't have to consider it again. You know, I would much prefer to see something like a spreadsheet where you could just put all the comments into a spreadsheet and collect everything. These are all the comments on paragraph 1. It doesn't matter who they came from or where they came from. So, you know, I've always been burdened with this form, which comes in from each delegation, and then I have to figure out, you know, did they all make the same comment or what?
There are from ISO some recommendations for preparing a meeting. ISO recommends to use email, groupware, teleconferences as often as possible. There's also ISO web conferencing tool available now called WebEx. You will find probably the information here with this link. This shall be done to enhance the output of a meeting, to provide a decision-making ability that the working group will be done efficiently. So the meeting shall be planned well in advance. So the delegates shall have knowledge of the work, not only the current work, also the work which was done in the history or the history of the project. So not only the agenda, but all the basic documents shall be made available to the experts in advance. So they recommend at least 4 months before the meeting, and other documents at least 6 weeks before the meeting. The working language shall be chosen of one of the official languages of ISO, which is English, French, or Russian. Of course, on working group 5, which is the management working group, we have done a little bit more detailed recommendations, which I only want to mention here. It's only a recommendation by the working group 5 to enhance the working group meetings. So the first is on preparation and status, that the project leader shall check the status of all his projects with the secretariat, and where appropriate via the secretariat with the central secretariat, so that they don't have to face any cancellation. So any questions coming up to these projects shall be addressed in advance, and also a solution shall be prepared, which may be then presented and discussed at the working group meeting. Of course, the action will be here the project lead. For participation, because sometimes we are missing some of the P members in the working groups, we shall ensure that we have all P members within one working group represented. so that the working group convener shall contact all the P members for each meeting again to participate on each working group meeting and invite them in time. The third is referring to the project work. It's used in the SC14 that all projects will be done within a working group, but often only part of the experts are addressed by this specific subject. So it's possible to do splinter meetings, but to ensure that all the experts are involved, these splinter meetings shall be planned well in advance. To do it mostly before the working group meeting, maybe on the first day or on the second or the first 2 days, and then have on the second or third days the whole working group meeting to discuss the results of the output of the splinter meeting. This has also to be organized by the working group convener. And what we have as a standing action item to all working group members in the working group 5 is that all the members shall look if there are interfaces to other stakeholders, to other bodies, which are necessary to take into account for our work. So within, of course, the scope of the working group. The last one will be on the framework. This is normally presented at the plenary meeting for each working group. So we have to face very often that a new work item coming out and all the working group members are surprised by the new work item. And it's expected by the originator that they shall give their opinion on the working group meeting without any background information, with only contact to the experts on their own organization. So we propose that if there is a potential new work item, this shall be proposed in advance to the working group for discussion on the working group, so that every working group member has the possibility to go back to his background, to his organization, to get a proper position on that, which can be then discussed on the working group level. So we said at least 6 weeks before the meeting, these information shall be provided. So these are only recommendations by the working group 5, which we are using. And it's up to you, working group, if you have similar recommendations for your work. Do you want to add something?
Yeah, I mean, these are working group 5 procedures. You would expect working group 5 would be best managed because it's the management working group. But these are good things. We should all do things this way. Understand as much as possible before the meeting. Come to the meeting knowing what's happened before, even if you're new. There have been decisions made before you came, and we should not have to revisit these items just because you're new and you just showed up. So there is a responsibility, for example, when somebody retires or resigns, that he should provide information to whoever comes after him, and that person should be familiar with the information. You know, it's a good thing to say. It's hard to get people to do it. In fact, ISO in the directives say that if there are any procedures that are not cited in the directives, then Robert's Rules of Order apply. Robert's Rules of Order have been translated into every language in the world. So if there is any doubt about, you know, what is consensus or who gets to vote or what disciplinary action can we take, if it's not an ISO directives, Robert's Rules of Order is there to give us guidance. Another thing is there's no question that we have a language problem. We do not have translators. We do not have resources for translation. It's often very difficult to understand each other. And you know, nous Américains insistent que tout le monde parle anglais. There are very few Americans that speak any other language. So, you know, we shouldn't insist that everybody be fluent in English. We should try as hard as we can to understand each other. There is also a tendency to put words in other people's mouth. You know, when somebody who's not a native English speaker is finding difficulty expressing a thought, the Americans and the British are very quick to say, oh, this is what you mean to say. I don't know what he means to say. You know, they just get impatient with the time it takes, but we must take the time. And, you know, at least I am willing to conduct meetings in French if the French are willing to put up with my French. But Russian's a little harder. But all ISO documents are published both in English and in French.
So what Dave said, if he show you the whole standardization process, that within the CD stage, it's very important that, or it's necessary that all the technical issues are resolved, and there's a consensus achieved within the working group. So this is, it will be very helpful if the originator of a new work item proposal will provide with the new work item proposal an outline or a working draft for the discussion within the working group, where the working group can then face all the details of the proposal and to come to a consensus which covers all the technical items of the document. So then for the CD stage, after the commenting phase and the finalization of the CD draft, taking into account the comments, the CD will go for voting, for balloting, and there is must be voted with less than 2 negative votes. Yeah. Yeah. So I think I said this already. Yeah, the next stage is then to go for the draft international standard on the inquiry stage. So all the technical content should be solved before this stage. Then on this stage, which is now also changed on the new directive, there's only a 3 months ballot period. In the past it was a 5 months ballot period. And 2/3 of all P-member votes must be cast in favor, and no more than 25% shall be negative. This is the approval requirements to pass this stage and the vote. There's also a possibility if you have a 100% approval, then there's also a decision possible for direct publication as an IS, so to skip the FDIS stage. If there is a disapproval, then a new draft has to be provided within 25 months. Also, there's an option to skip the FDIS stage by a resolution by the subcommittee, which has to be done at the plenary or per voting per email. So all the work or the management then of these voting is done by the Central Secretariat of ISO. It's not more in the hand of the subcommittee secretariat. So there are some possibilities which are also addressed by Dave before. So if there's approval of the FDIS or this, the standard will be published as an international standard. If there is a disapproval, then within 25 months you have to provide a new draft, or if it is sustaining, then this can be published as a technical specification. So if something has to be corrected after the publication, so there are two possibilities. You can add these corrections as a technical corrigendum or as an amendment to the published standard. But nevertheless, each ISO standard are under systematic review, and the first systematic review will be after 3 years to see if the technical content of the standard and the application is correct. And after additional systematic review will be after 5 years. So for a systematic review, there are different answers possible. So the confirmation, also with corrections, to revise or give an amendment to the standard, or to withdraw. And of course, if you abstain the votes, then this is also a possibility. So this is back to Dave.
Maybe I'll stay on this side this time, so I don't fall off the stage when I walk across. I mentioned the ISO directives. There are only 2. They are available to anyone free on the ISO website. The first one has to do with procedures and the organization for carrying out the technical work. I made you walk across the stage, okay? And the part 2 are the structure and drafting of the actual documents. One thing we didn't mention is that ISO was actually formed from 2 different standards organizations. I forget when it happened, a long time ago. But the other one is called the International Electrotechnical Commission, and they now operate together. In some things they have slightly different rules, but nothing that deserves to be mentioned. Now this is extremely important. I'm very gratified that not many people have fallen asleep, and I'll let you. I know who you are, so I'll talk to you afterward, Heracles. But now I'm not going to mention any names. And I should tell you, I used to teach at the United States Air Force Academy, and cadets fall asleep all the time in class, and I learned techniques to wake them up. Nobody's left the room except one, and that person I'll catch up with separately. So we've told you, what the ISO directives are and what the documents say about how ISO is organized. You can almost forget all that because SC14 operates differently. And we are more like a technical committee than we are like a subcommittee. For example, in a subcommittee that has working groups, the working groups are not permanent. As I said earlier, the working groups are, the subcommittee decides that a standard is appropriate. There are nominations for the working group leader. He's confirmed by the subcommittee, and then the working group leader, picks his people. They do their work, and when their work is finished, the working group goes away. That's the way it is in most of ISO. Now, some of these working groups are effectively permanent because they're, the subject that they're dealing with is changing all the time, and they have to keep up with it. But a lot of them are, temporary. They come and they go, and they have terms of reference that actually specify an end date and milestones for assessment by the subcommittee. And if the subcommittee is not happy with the progress, they can disband the working group with a vote of the P members. But I'm down on the third line here. This. So, it's a group without the P of experts appointed to develop normative documents for a specific need. That's what the ISO directive says. But for SC14, the working groups are more or less permanent, except when, for example, ODCWG was created because there was intense interest in orbital debris. But over all of ISO, the working groups come and the working groups go. We are more like really subcommittee chairman in other ISO technical committees, or in CCSDS, they call them area directors. So the technical advisory group, according to the ISO directives, is supposed to develop the national delegation position on activities that come for ballot. So each national delegation has people on all the working groups. They should meet separately in their own country, and the country only gets one vote, so they have to discuss among themselves, no matter what working group they're in or what standard they're participating in, what the overall national delegation position should be. And that is the job of the technical advisory group chairman. And he really leads the technical work, and not the real work, but the organization of the technical work from the national perspective. And again, in SC14, this is implemented in various ways. Some countries have technical advisory groups. Some countries do it in some other way through some other body. Really, there is no formal requirement for establishing the national position. Everybody can vote, you can count a majority, or you can just discuss it, and the technical advisory group can decide based on his own judgment what the national position should be. There's no, any requirements for voting and decision making are purely on the individual national prerogative. Now, the head of delegation in the ISO directives is the senior person to represent that delegation at a meeting, at a plenary meeting. It's not a permanent position. It's the one individual that is designated to speak at the plenary in behalf of the whole delegation. There is no administrative authority. It is not a permanent position. Now, in many cases, it's effectively permanent. The Secretariat nominates to, in our case, ANSI, the delegation for each plenary. And also it designates who is the head of delegation and who are the people who will represent that standards body, not the nation, but the standards body in the plenary meeting. In the United States, it's a permanent position. It has some administrative authority, but again, it's different. I spoke to Andreas, and the delegation is appointed each time, and the head of delegation. It just happens that Andreas has been nominated 10 times, but it's not really supposed to be a permanent position. And then at the bottom, there are the technical experts, and as I said, they're supposed to act in a personal capacity and contribute on the basis of their own personal knowledge and experience and involvement. They are not supposed to carry with them a national position on the individual standard. That comes in at the subcommittee stage in the advancement to a committee draft. But we operate differently. There are some national delegations that do require that the working group members carry forth the national position. I won't comment on Maybe I just commented when I said I won't comment. And at the working group meetings for SC14, the actual technical expert can't always be there, or we may not have the money to send all the experts, so we send a single person or one or two people to represent all the technical interests, and that's admissible, that there be an intermediary, that there be a representative and not the person himself at the meeting. However, during the development of the standard, outside of meetings through email or whatever, it has to be the technical expert. So the distinction between what the directives say and the way SC14 actually operates in practice is important for you to know. And I don't know if, Larry, would you have any comments, or did I misstate or say anything wrong or whatever? Next slide. This is an important administrative matter. I don't have to go through every one of them, but and on the next slide too. Copyrighted or private proprietary information should not be included in a standard. It is sometimes the case that some manufacturer or developer will want an international standard created that requires that everybody buy his product. That's human nature, but that is not acceptable in ISO generally. There is a circumstance in which it is acceptable, and that is when the owner of the information or the patent agrees to make it freely available to anybody who uses the standard. At that point, it doesn't matter if it's a patent or not, but there are people who will patent information or techniques just so that they can claim, I'm the one who invented this, not necessarily to make money from it. But SC13 recently had a serious issue with a standard that they developed that required that everybody use a certain provider's piece of equipment, and that is not allowed in ISO. It's against all of the principles of international standardization. As I said, the languages are English, French, and Russian. However, for Russian, the national body has to provide the translators. If they choose to conduct the meeting in Russian, lead the meeting in Russian, then the Russian delegation has to be able to translate for everybody else into whatever language. However, if somebody decides to conduct a meeting in French, as someday I hope Severin does, anybody who doesn't understand French is out of luck, because that's an official language. Let's see, any category A liaison can propose a standard, and people who are persistently inactive, not contributing, through attendance at working group meetings or correspondence, shall be removed from that working group. So you can't just come to a meeting, make comments, expect everybody else to do the work, come back to the next meeting and say everything is wrong because I didn't agree with this. It's your responsibility to participate. And another important point is that if you are responsible for an action item or for a standard, it is not appropriate to say, I couldn't get this work done because nobody helped me. If somebody promised you something and they did not provide it, you should not wait until they decide someday or never to give you that information. You've established action items, you've established dates. If the responsible person for that action item is unresponsive, it is your responsibility to find some other way to get that information and not just wait forever for somebody else to provide something that you don't want to do. And we have a couple of standards among us that are just that way. They drag on year after year. The responsible party always comes back at every meeting and says, well, I couldn't get it done because the United States didn't provide their launch schedule. That is not an acceptable reason for not getting it done. You accept responsibility and accountability for completing the work however you need to do to complete it. The last one is, an administrative matter about, well, it's more than administrative because we have a serious problem. There are not many places where we can hold plenary meetings and assure that all the necessary people can be there. And the United States is one of the worst places. It is very difficult for representatives from China in particular to get visas to come to an ISO meeting in the United States, and only a little bit less difficult for those from Russia. This is, I said the other day, and I'll say it again for those that didn't hear it, we're a technical organization, but we're also a political organization. We do have loyalties to our country and our government, and it's impossible that they would not affect how we participate in ISO matters. But, and I'll use my own country, there is great concern about transferring technical information to China. And our Department of State has delegated authority for granting visas to Russian or Chinese nationals to the very lowest level. So if you go into a United States embassy or consulate, the guard at the door almost literally can deny you your visa without any reason. They are so very concerned. Sometimes they will try to look like they're more fair, and you submit your request for a visa, but they will not act on it until after the meeting is over. They'll approve your attendance after it's too late to participate. And this is the world that we live in. So at first I thought, okay, we can have meetings in Canada because they're not as restrictive on Russia or China or even other countries. Well, now Canada is very restrictive too. In fact, Canada is restrictive on many U.S. citizens that come for certain purposes. They're concerned that an American will take a job away from a Canadian. So if you're coming to work, and you cross the border, if you're an American, this is guidance for those of us that do this. If they ask you, why are you coming? You say, I'm a tourist. You don't say, I'm here to work. And there is also contention between the United States and Brazil. Now that's getting better, but the United States has very strict requirements on issuing visas for Brazilian citizens. So to compensate, Brazil makes it hard for United States citizens to come to Brazil. It was a very, very long and involved process to go through. So we should try, when we hold meetings, to hold them in places where everybody who can contribute can really come there. And it's very, very difficult to do. In fact, the only place that I have seen anybody from anywhere could come to a technical meeting is China. The United States is very hard, and it's not just us, it's any technical or scientific society. Canada is getting harder. The UK is a bit difficult, particularly for Russian citizens. So I don't know how we work around this. Maybe Singapore or Hong Kong. But there are always people who intend to come to a meeting until the last minute. They're going to be here, and then for an administrative reason, they were unable, and our work is disrupted. So, I've said it. I really don't know what to do about it, except that we have to be vigilant. And so somebody said, well, just start far enough in advance, so that if there are any difficulties, we can overcome them in time. Well, in the United States, that didn't work. If you apply for your visa 6 months ahead, they'll wait to 6 months after the meeting to approve it. So it's my country. I love it. And this is about patents and trademarks. And I think this hopefully is the last slide. Andreas will tell me I still got more to go, but after this he's going to go through what the ISO website and other things look like. But we're here to promote collaboration, interoperability, innovation, and development of a market, not to restrict innovation, not to make it hard for certain products to be used everywhere, and particularly in space where around the world commercial operations and contracts for launches from any place that's convenient and affordable. I don't know if I need to say any more about that. And these things I've said, that ISO can't be used to promote your own product or your own industry. You also can't invalidate the way people do things. If there is a large common way of doing things, you can't create a standard that says do it some other way. Even if that existing way is maybe inefficient a little bit, but you can't invalidate the way anybody does anything, because that also is a possible way to exert inappropriate influence. Like, one country is farther ahead in satellite communications, so we'll put together an ISO group that establishes a new standard, and all the United States equipment is no longer good. You can't do that. You shouldn't do that. And it's not done for your own individual, elevation. It is better for a working group to have only one standard it's working on and to do it well than to think that it has a large volume of standards that make it look like it's very busy, but they can't do it all. And of course, we're not to take personal advantage, to exploit our responsibilities and authority within ISO to promote our own interests. That I sell information about characteristics of the atmosphere, so I'll create a standard that requires that everybody has to buy information about the atmosphere, and I'll sell it to them. That's not right either. So, am I through, Andreas, or I have more that I forgot about? No, this is you.
So, as I said before, there are some information tools provided by ISO. So one of them is the ISO LiveLink system, and here you can get access to this system via your member body, but also if you are head of delegation, working group convener, or if you have a project lead, then you can get an account here to have directly access. Then if you need an access, then you can also contact, I think, Nick on that. Yeah, or through the national body. Yeah. So the ISO LiveLink system, also LiveLink is not only used by ISO, it's an information system where also voting possibilities are, providing different documents and information. It's also used by national members like DEAN or by the European standardization organization. So you get a login account, then you find some several information domains. So the most interesting is the project portal, so where you find all the projects of your subcommittee. For example, you can put in here a number and search for all the SC14 projects, where you find the registration date, the stage, that's some kind of numbers of the different stages within the standardization development process, the stage date, the limit date, and if there is already an extension approved or not, and the responsible committee. If you here, mark one of these links, then you get to the information for a single project. So you find here all the steps of the project within the date which are achieved or which is now on the current stage here, for example, this one for the FDIS. Also, you will find here some red marked parts if you are on the critical list. So if you don't meet a deadline, for example, this one here for the FDIS registration, so that you can see if your project is currently on the critical list or if you will not meet a specific deadline. So as reference documents, I listed here some reference documents. I think most relevant is the directives, part 1 and part 2. There is a new edition coming out 2 weeks ago. And also supplements. Also you will find the directives with commenting marks in it, where you have some additional information. Also very nice with only 20 pages. Here is my ISO job, which is a guidance for delegates and experts. We put out some information here also in the presentation. You will find all these documents here on the ISO website. I put in some links, so you are free to look after these several hundred pages of these documents. Dave and I tried to give here a summary with these 50 slides on the most important items which are described in detail here in these documents. Yeah. So, if you have any questions, then we are happy to answer your questions.
Well, I was going to say, if they have any questions, ask Nick, not us. Particularly because Nick is not here, so. But I thank you for staying here so long and for mostly staying awake. And it's a lot of information, as Andreas said. We'll post these. We can't, it's a 2 megabyte file, so emailing it may not be a good idea. But it will be posted in locations that anybody can download it. And, I realize that we'll come to the next meeting and all of you won't remember all these things. And you'll ask, what's a working draft and what's a technical advisory group? But there's no excuse now. Nick, I just told them if they had questions, they could ask you. Or Amy. Amy is good too. So are there any comments or questions? Whoever's still awake? Yes, Anton. Maybe we should pass the one of the microphones. Yeah, the problem, Anton, is that we can hear you, but the people in front of you are facing the other way, and they can't hear what you said.
Yeah,
so
I think I'll just repeat what his question. If I'm correct, you said that will we have access to the projects 10 years from now on ISO LiveLink? Is that correct? Project history. Yeah, from my knowledge, yes, but I don't know how easily you can navigate in ISO LiveLink, because their database will have that record, but I don't know whether it'll be available there. So I can ask Central Secretariat and see whether you can access that easily or not. But they should have it in terms of history.
Yeah, any other questions you can ask Thais, who just walked in and didn't listen to anything.
Severin?
A very minor comment. I just see on some slides that the name of working group 5 is program management. But I just remind that we had a resolution saying that it's program management and quality.
Yes.
So I think it could be nice to correct this point. First point. Second one, I think we had a very nice presentation. It could be useful, in addition to that one, to have 2 or 3 pages, no more, highlighting the most important things. Because most of the time we know a lot of things, but we know that there is, regarding on the expert, regarding on the national member, how to answer to the vote, things like that. It could be sometimes very interesting to have a resume. It's not so easy to make it. I'm not saying it's easy, but in addition to that one, which it's very interesting, could be if we can have 2 or 3 pages, no more, in a Word file, very simple, just to highlight the main things. Maybe we can propose something next period.
Sabrine, do you mean here the possible review results? That's the possible answers for a ballot.
Well, we'll have to iterate it a few times, but things like you must vote, and if you don't vote, you'll be eliminated. There are some very, big points that I understand. And I think it's not so hard.
In fact, here we have the rules, but we don't have the consequences if you're not applying some rules. That's very important. For example, if you don't nominate an expert at national level, what does it mean for you? If you want to vote, you have to nominate an expert, which is not. You have to decode this behind the slides. It's not well written in this way, and it's exactly what we need sometimes when we have some discussion, because we don't understand some consequences, not making some actions. It's a little bit in different way.
I'm involved in several different kinds of organizations, and the truth is that this is not a court of law, and you can violate any rules you want to, and maybe nobody will do anything about it. It's a matter of how serious and how dedicated all of us are, particularly the Secretariat, to making people hurt. But there is no authority to really hurt people. If you don't vote, we can't take you outside and beat you up. And there are many organizations like that. Ethics is another matter. We have codes of conduct and we have ethics, but there's really no enforcement, no precise sanction. So there are some things for which there are rules. You get kicked out if you don't come to meetings. But there are many things for which there are rules, but nothing happens.
Any further comments or questions?
En français, s'il vous plaît.
Would you please tell me why there is no information about developers on the title of standard or on the back of the standard somewhere? Why there is no information about developers?
Oh, yeah, they're not. This is a good point. I think I understand. For example, in the American Institute of Aeronautics and Astronautics, every standard has a page that says who contributed to this standard. In ISO, that's even prohibited. The standards, everybody is responsible because everybody voted, everybody had comments. It took a long time. There's a process. So in principle, everybody who participates in ISO is accountable for every standard. They do not attribute the authorship to individuals in the published standard. That's the practice. And there's a reason for that, too, that, because people might just want to have their name on many standards to get, to be listed so that they can put it on their resume. And that's not the purpose. Nick, can you?
I think there's also liability issues. I think part of the ISO reasoning is that if you list individuals or certain organizations, that if a standard somehow, for safety reasons, hurts or hurts something else, then that individual or that particular organization can be sued, potentially.
Yeah.
And so what they try to do is try to prevent that from happening and not list anybody at all.
Yeah, in fact, it's happened. There is, I don't know if Roberto or one of the Italian representatives is here, but not too many years ago there was an earthquake in Italy, and those who predicted the earthquake underestimated the magnitude of the earthquake, and the preparations were not sufficient for the amount of damage that was done. And the report that predicted the earthquake, it had authors. There was attribution. So the city that was damaged is now suing all of the people that put together that report for not doing their job right, for not using the right model and giving them, information that wasn't sufficient. So it happens that if there's attribution, there's also liability. So now you know why. You may not agree that it's the right thing, but that's the reason. Severin, you want the microphone again? Oh, three microphones. Brazil is an advanced.
This is not a comment, but maybe an idea to be developed within the frame of SC14. Most of the time, people are asking to us what is the benefit of standards and standardization. I think if we can develop some kit of presentation showing through what we have developed within the frame of SC14, a kit of presentation of showing the benefit of standards for the space sector. I know it's not so easy to make it, but to take through examples, the benefit of standardization within the frame of SC14, that could be very, very useful.
Yeah, in fact, about once a year, the magazine ISO Focus asks us, some of us, to write articles. So there have been a couple of articles of that nature in ISO Focus. Now the problem is that who reads ISO Focus? It's only ISO. But I'll say more about this tomorrow because there is a very big United Nations study going on for the long-term sustainability of space activities. All nations are involved, more than in this subcommittee. And the basis for what they're doing, they have already said that the best way to make sure that we keep space useful and available is through best practices and standards. So that is really an opportunity for us to have worldwide visibility. And I've got a resolution I'll propose tomorrow about how SC14 should make sure that its activities and the benefits are used in that study. The study was created by Gerard Brachet, who you know well. It's now headed by Peter Martinez, who is from South Africa, but a very capable person. And the next meeting is in June in Vienna. But I have a resolution about how we, a suggestion about how we should all make sure our individual national delegations to that study emphasize the work that we do.
Yeah, and I think to follow up with what Dave said, I believe ISO and ANSI, the American National Standards Institute, do have on their website an equivalent to Standards Boost Business. So it gives a case study on how standards benefit your business. It's not specific to space, so it doesn't answer your question. But I think it's a good foundation to use those case models that they have in ANSI Boost Business and in ISO I believe it's called ISO Standards Boost Business as well, or something like that. But it's a good model and a good foundation for us to use if we go that way in terms of developing our own case studies in the space industry.
I think we've done, yeah.
Well, thank you again for enduring this. Everyone except Thais is dismissed. We will start over again for Thais, who wasn't here. I like Thais. She's a medical doctor. She can fix us all. Dismissed. Au revoir. Zai Chen.